She was raped and left for dead by this man. And she wakes up the next day and finds him lying next to her, crying. And she turns to him and starts to comfort him with his tears. She calls him baby. Baby, what's wrong? And then she says, please don't tell anyone about this. You know, I would be so embarrassed. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is such a powerful example that she was literally left for dead. And she leans to this man as her only chance at still surviving it all. And she gets back in his car as though they're sort of a couple now and together, and they drive back into civilization from the middle of the desert. And she's ultimately able to escape, right? She escapes. She saves her own life because she called him baby. And she said, she made it about her. She soaked up all the shame, right? Oh, it's not you. You didn't do a bad thing. Please don't tell anybody that this happened. It was powerful.
It makes a lot of sense that I'm thinking about how you just said, for you, when you did try to stand up, you know, for yourself and have a fight response, it made things worse. I mean, in a way, getting back to where we started in terms of, you know, power hierarchies in the White House, I imagine that a lot of some of those cabinet members that say what they say about President Trump because he does fire people if they don't.
That's right.
if they don't, you know, compliment him enough. He has a long history of doing that. You could just wake up one day and find out on social media that you lost your job as secretary of whatever department. So it could make things worse. But let's put the political power issue aside, because I think on a normal human level for all of the rest of us, how do you, with the threat of things getting worse with other responses, how do you counsel the clients you work with to sort of slowly remove themselves from having this fawning trauma response?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I say you're never going to get rid of it, just as you're not going to get rid of a fight response, right? Like these are hardwired instincts, and I'm grateful for them. But where we do have a shot at change is when there's a chronic presentation, right? When it's happening, whether there's an experience or a sense of threat at all or not, this is where we can start to move the needle. And so ultimately, I say it has to start with changing this external focus from, you know, do you validate me? Do you give me permission? Are you mad at me? Like, how can I help you? And really turning inward and to the body, to our sense of what do I notice right now? What am I experiencing right now? This somatic language that starts to bring us into present tense, into our own body, and we start to grow, for some of us, the first time ever, a genuine relationship to self, a real experience of internal safety. Because without that, what you're saying is, well, just go out in the world and set a healthy boundary, have a voice. What's probably going to happen is it's not going to go as well as you hoped, and the body's going to go, see, I knew it wasn't worth it. I'm never going to do that again. As opposed to once I start to build a sense of internal safety, I can engage in healthy conflict. I can start to discern between, is this discomfort or is this actually danger, right? Over time, when you're in these chronic patterns, you lose the sense, the ability to discern. And so it's a slow process, but it's one of reconnecting to self, to our own body. And ultimately, for people with a history of complex trauma, I think seeing a trauma therapist tends to be an important part of that equation to reprocess some of those traumas, whether it's with EMDR, somatic experiencing, internal family systems. These are a few modalities that are well known for working with complex trauma.
But even the recognition, though, of how your body is responding, that seems to be a tall order.
Well, I think the psychoeducation, though, goes a long way in allowing people just out of the gates to finally make sense to themselves. I think so much of the discourse has been so shaming and blaming that people are really defeated. So just understanding, oh my gosh, my body actually adapted in this really genius way to help me stay even a little bit safer. Maybe not the safest, but let's be real, that wasn't an option, right? So understanding that we loved ourselves, this was a reflexive response to keep us safe, I think honestly goes a long way towards being able to do some of the other work that avails us more conscious awareness and flexibility. And yeah, but like I said, it's not about never fawning again, right? I wrote the book and I fawned however long ago with, the guy at baseball. It's going to happen.
Well, the book is Fawning: Why the Need to Please Makes Us Lose Ourselves and How to Find Our Way Back. It's by Ingrid Clayton. She's a clinical psychologist and a trauma therapist, specializes in addiction and trauma treatment. Ingrid, it's been a real pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Meghna.
I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. This is On Point.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and is distributed by APM, American Public Media.
Support for On Point comes from BetterHelp, committed to making mental well-being a priority and offering support in taking on everything life demands, with therapists available to communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public. And City Space Productions, WBUR's creative studio for custom podcasts that tell a brand's story to ignite engagement, reach new audiences, or establish thought leadership. WBUR.org/creative studio.
It's almost noon. This is KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, KQOW Bellingham, and on KUOW.org. And it's almost time for Week in Review. Here's host Bill Radke with a preview of today's show.
How protected is the freedom of speech these days in Western Washington? If you're a school principal, if you're a T-Mobile Park street preacher, we'll talk about that. We'll ask whether Seattle is into socialist stores and sewers. Also, can we shake down graffiti taggers for big money? And what made you smile this week? I think I said that last week, too.
KUOW and Arts Fund are proud to partner in support of our local arts community. This month, recognizing Spectrum Dance Theater. Spectrum Dance Theater's upcoming season reflects the urgency and importance of preserving truth in a time of historical and cultural erasure. Each performance is designed to engage, provoke thought, and inspire dialogue. Performances start in October. Tickets and information at spectrumdance.org.
Support for KUOW comes from Premera Blue Cross, with a variety of health plans designed to fit both employee and business needs, including a provider network, mental health resources, and access to Kinwell clinics. More information at business.premera.com.
Catch all the local newscasts in a new place, your podcast feed. Listen to KUOW Newscast, updated every hour with new headlines. Find it in the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
On the latest Sound Politics, Charlie Kirk's murder still has many in Washington state reeling.
And nationally, it's raised huge questions about violence, free speech, and where our country is headed if we can't disagree peacefully, especially considering polling that shows a small but growing number of Americans believe political violence can be justified.
We're going to talk about all that on the show with local conservative commentator Brandy Cruz on Sound Politics, wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got a nice weekend in store. You can do yard work and you can water the lawn without having to turn on the sprinkler. Sunny today with a high expected of 73, 74 tomorrow. Tomorrow night, a slight chance of showers, and Sunday, showers on and off throughout the day. So if you're taking advantage of the last weekend of the Puyallup Fair, make sure to take your rain gear. It's 12:01.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Hours after the U.S. House approved legislation on largely partisan lines that funds federal agencies through November 21st, the U.S. Senate failed to advance the bill. NPR's Deirdre Walsh reports the prospects of a shutdown are increasing.
The Senate failed to get the 60 votes needed to advance a stopgap funding bill. 2 Republicans and all but 1 Democrat opposed the bill the House had just approved. An alternative Democratic proposal also failed. House Speaker Mike Johnson says the Democrats' push to add an extension of health care subsidies to the package was a non-starter and says they should be blamed if the government shuts down.
If they choose to vote against this clean, completely nonpartisan CR, then they will be choosing to shut the government down, and they will owe the consequences of what happens following that.
Both the House and Senate are scheduled to be on recess next week. Unless the 2 chambers agree on a funding deal, a shutdown could start on October 1st. Deirdre Walsh, NPR News, the Capitol.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention panel that advises the government on vaccines will delay its vote on hepatitis B vaccinations following heated debate during a 2-day meeting. The members of this group were selected by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has long questioned the safety and effectiveness of vaccines. Elaine Chen is a reporter for our partners at STAT, the Health and Medicine publication.
The current schedule for hepatitis B is that the first dose is given to newborns at birth in the hospital. But the group was recommending that this first dose be delayed to 1 month. And specifically for children born to mothers who test negative for hepatitis B. And many experts that we talked to were very concerned with this.
Elaine Chen speaking with NPR. Now to Gaza City, where staff at the main morgue say at least 50 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli attacks over the past 24 hours. Israeli forces are also operating in the south. NPR's Anis Baba reports the military says 4 soldiers were killed yesterday in Gaza, but offered no further details.
That's the sound of Israeli warplanes bombing Gaza City with at least 60 missiles back to back. The intense bombardments came without warning. Israel has ordered all of Gaza City's residents to leave south as its troops make a push for the center, but hundreds of thousands of people remain. Many say they have no place to go. Others do not have the thousands of dollars it costs to move south. And some families fled but returned to Gaza City, citing inhumane conditions in the south. The offensive in Gaza City comes as 14 countries at the UN Security Council voted in support for an immediate ceasefire. Anis Baba, NPR News, Gaza City.
On social media, President Trump says he'll be hosting Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan at the White House next Thursday to talk about trade and military deals. This is NPR News.
This is KUOW News. I'm Paige Browning in Seattle. A federal court will hear arguments next week about the use of racial profiling in immigration arrests. In preparation, immigrant rights advocates held a vigil in downtown Seattle this week. KUOW's Gustavo Segrero reports.
The class action lawsuit is over the federal government's use of skin color, language, and type of work to determine who ICE can arrest during immigration enforcement. It comes at the heels of a recent Supreme Court ruling allowing ICE in Southern California to do just that. Palmira Figueroa was at the vigil representing the National Day Laborers Organizing Network.
The fact that the highest court in the land just said that's okay is really wrong. And it is a sign of authoritarianism. And it is a sign of fascism.
Figueroa and her network aren't waiting for the courts to find clarity on this use of racial profiling or whether it could be used more broadly like in Seattle. Over the past weeks, the group has trained hundreds of volunteers in Washington state to operate as a community watch, posted up near places where day laborers wait for a job. Gustavo Segrero, KUOW News.
The star baker behind a Seattle institution is headed to Paris for the World Cup of Baking. William Lehman founded Bakery Nouveau, and now he'll coach the U.S. team in its quest for gold. The international baking competition will host a dozen teams from around the world. In sports, the Seattle Storm's playoff run has come to an end. The team had a chance to beat the Las Vegas Aces last night in the final seconds of a must-win game.
It comes off, loose ball, way to go. Williams, it won't count. It's over. The Aces advance.
Player Erica Wheeler said after the game, losing by 1 point hurts, but says the Storm gave the Aces a battle. Final score, Aces 74, the Storm 73. This is KUOW News in Seattle.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance. Progressive is looking for dedicated and forward-thinking individuals to join their growing team. More information, including application, at progressive.com/careers.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. Hey, I'm Bill Radke, and I don't like being alone between noon and 1 on Fridays. I like to have smart, likable people with me to go through the week's news and consider together. I mean, I'm talking the former Attorney General of Washington State, Rob McKenna, is back here. Hey, Rob.
I didn't realize those were the criteria. Smart and likable. I'm
likable.
really sorry.
I'm a little worried too.
That was Erica Barnett, the smart and likable co-founder and publisher of PubliCola and co-host of the ironically named Seattle Nice podcast. So you must be nice.
We're pretty nice to each other on that podcast.
Relatively nice. Yes.
We're all friends.
Scott Greenstone does a podcast with Libby Dinkman on KUOW, and I'd say you're very nice to one another and your guests.
Oh, yes. I think we're the nicest podcast around. Sorry, no
Wow.
no hate to Seattle nice.
Wow, the nice hatred happening. No, that's our politics reporter and co-host of the Sound Politics, Scott Greenstone. And we're back on YouTube. We were not last week, but Stephen Miller said it was okay. So we're on. Shall we start
now?
Yeah,
for
just
now. Shall we start with free speech? I think that's top of my mind. What free speech rights do we have these days in Washington State under President Trump? And are they any different from the rights we had last year under President Biden, et cetera? This question's come up over DEI programs and Israel critiques. This week it was speech about Charlie Kirk, the Trump ally assassinated on a Utah campus. After Jimmy Kimmel's commentary on ABC, Trump's FCC chair came after ABC's parent company, and Kimmel's off the air for now. Also commenting on the Kirk killing was North Creek High School principal Eric McDowell in Bothell, who wrote on his personal Instagram account, quote, "Thoughts and prayers. Too bad gun control would have been far, far more effective. He'd still be alive. Maybe thoughts and prayers will work. Oops, nope." End of quote. KUOW reporter Eilish O'Neill told us that McDowell is now taking some sort of break.
After backlash on right-wing media sites, McDowell wrote to families and staff on Sunday saying he would step away for the time being. The district says it launched the investigation in response to formal complaints. It's received 30 emails and phone calls, as well as more than 60 anonymous comments about the matter, but some of those could have been from the same people. Some of the comments have been complaints, but others have been supportive of the principal. Vice President J.D. Vance and other high-profile politicians have called for people who make disparaging comments about Charlie Kirk on social media to be fired.
Erica Barnett, what do you think should happen to this principal, this Bothell principal?
I think that the statement that he made was really standard Democratic type commentary, middle of the road, moderate commentary that is made after mass shootings happen, which they do all too often in this country because guns are way too readily available. There's no other country like us. And the fact that there's this censorious backlash, I think, speaks to the moment that we're going to talk about, that we're all in right now, where certain types of speech, that is speech that is not aligned with the MAGA movement, is punished by social media program that leads to doxing, that leads to calls for firing people, and that leads to threats of violence. And so I think that what this guy said was pretty anodyne.
But didn't the oops, nope, wasn't that a big part of the flippancy after someone's assassination that led to this?
I mean,
outcry?
Well, first of all, I think we have to look, a little broader than this one comment. I mean, no, I don't think that is a particularly inflammatory thing to say at all. Personally, I think that's pretty standard. But I mean, the censoriousness is not like, they're not reacting to oops, nope. They're reacting to the fact that somebody said anything that was not, wildly praising Charlie Kirk as an American hero.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you look at the broader context of all the people that are getting doxxed right now, all the people, that people are calling to be fired because of social media commentary around the country, I don't think that you could look at this one and say, or look at all of those and say, oh, there's something uniquely different about each one of those comments that people have made of the, thousands of people around the country that, are whose heads are being called for right now. Like, oops, nope. Oh, well, that makes it different.
Okay.
I just, and I don't think that's a particularly inflammatory thing to say or observe about the lack of gun control in this country that allowed this young man to obtain this gun that he, arguably should never have been allowed to obtain.
From his grandfather, apparently. It'd be interesting to know more about that. But my reaction to this is, not surprisingly, with my lawyer hat on, I've represented a school district. I have a lot of experience with First Amendment case law, and the fact is there's a lot of Supreme Court case law and Circuit Court of Appeals case law around public employee speech. So I agree with Erica. I didn't think what he said was all that remarkable. What the school district, I think, is reacting to is not what he put on Instagram. It's the reaction to it. Justified or not, they've now launched what looks to me like a fairly pro forma investigation or response. It's
a third-party investigation.
Yeah.
They say it's standard procedure.
I think it actually is, and I think they do it. I think they do it in part just to be consistent. But interestingly, the leading case on public employee speech involves a high school teacher named Pickering. This is from the 1960s. He wrote a letter to the editor. He was critical of the school of the school district and the school board. His letter contained erroneous facts about the budget. They fired him, and that case went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they overturned that firing, and they established what's called the Pickering balancing test. And I'm mentioning this because what public employers do is sort of balance the employee's right to speak on a matter of public concern with their need to be able to serve the public interest and, in the case of a school, not have a disrupted learning environment, right? So that's just the test. I don't know how that's going to come
and
out
an
in this case.
personal Instagram account that wasn't around in Pickering's day.
True enough. And what's interesting, but what he wrote was he wrote a letter to the editor. It was just a private letter, right? He wasn't writing it on school stationery or whatever. But there are a lot of cases involving higher education professors and lecturers and public education teachers that involve social media, also involving other kinds of public employees like assistant district attorneys and cops and their social media posts. So it's a little different for public employees because of this balancing, but I don't know how this investigation is going to turn out. Given what he wrote, it would be surprising if there's any real discipline that results from this. But notice that he stepped away before the school district. I mean, he wrote that he was stepping away.
That's what he wrote, yes.
Yeah, so I think they just want to let this all calm down. What do you think, Scott?
I would be curious to know whether he received pressure from inside to to step down or to step away, or whether or not it was just his decision based on what it sounds like is a lot of backlash online. I do think, this statement is not as inflammatory as one that I saw from a Kelso City Council member, Jim Hill, who is getting a lot of blowback for a comment on a Substack. And again, this is Kelso down in Southwest Washington. He wrote, "There is one less voice to promote Trump's agenda. Perhaps it's a good thing his voice was silenced." That to me is the statements. I think when we look at statements being made, there are some that are much more further on the spectrum of, okay, that doesn't seem so appropriate. Now he's an elected official, so it's a lot different than a public employee.
Yeah, if the test is disrupting the learning environment, does that necessarily go one-to-one with how mad you are, or how flippant, or how outrageous, or whatever? How do you know how much, whether it's disruptive or not?
There are a number of tests they apply. Is like, how does it affect this person's relationship with other employees? Does it affect the ability of people he works with to work with him? What are the students saying? What are the parents saying? But it's as you pointed out, Bill,
that sounds vague.
It's an event. Well, it's fact intensive, as we like to say.
Okay,
but it's
that sounds like a lawyer word, or maybe a public employee word.
I get paid a lot to know that word. That's right. So that fact intensive, but. I think, it's pro forma. They're going to investigate. I just can't see this amounting to anything, honestly.
And I think one thing that they didn't have at the time of Pickering, too, is online social media mobs. We don't know where these 63 comments whatever came from. whether they had anything to do, whether they're from people even within our state. And online mobs like the ones organized by Charlie Kirk, who had a professional watch list of people that he wanted to get fired and that he organized people against online on Twitter and other forums. We didn't have that. And so I think that the existence of these social media mobs, I don't know how that will get litigated, but I think the existence needs to be acknowledged because is this legitimate complaint from people, who believe that the learning environment for their children is going to be disrupted, or is it part of a social media mob, again, like the ones that Charlie Kirk himself was involved in drumming up?
Yeah, the Seventh Circuit just upheld the firing of a high school teacher in the Midwest who posted what were characterized as racially insensitive comments that caused a lot of upset among not current students but former students. And the Court of Appeals upheld the firing, even though it was a social media post. It was a thread that former students were on with him. And so it is, Bill, it is subjective. You're absolutely right.
Yes, Scott.
Well, I hope we just don't lose in this whole conversation that we're talking about employers, maybe public employees in some cases. And I do think this conversation has sort of jumped the shark to be a real, First Amendment question for this country, whether or not we really do care about the First Amendment. This week on Sound Politics, we had Brandy Cruz, a right-wing podcaster, on, and she has been calling for Attorney General Pam Bondi to step down because of Bondi's comments about prosecuting hate speech.
Right.
I think, we asked her about this too, is like, what about President Trump? When asked about this, he talked to a journalist of ABC News and said, well, I think, your criticism of me, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, that's hateful when you criticize me. Maybe we'll go after you. And so that's the thing that I'm really concerned about. Some of these comments from local city council members or whatever can be concerning, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the First Amendment has to do with Congress. It has to do with the government. It has to do with the Federal Communications Commission, right? And we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Okay, one little more local item near Bellingham. The Linden School District is establishing Charles James Kirk Day in his honor, and the school board cited a need for peaceful civic engagement and opposition to political violence of any kind. Linden officials say they hope to encourage student debate clubs to help build listening, reasoning, and leadership skills. And this observance is set to happen every year on the Monday before September 10th. Whether you liked Kirk's message or not, is any problem with this day of peaceful, quote unquote, peaceful civic engagement and debate?
Well, talk about disrupting the student environment by taking, an inflammatory person and using their murder, which is a tragedy, of course, and honoring that person with an entire day of events that I assume are going to be mandatory for students to attend, as it's mandatory for students to go to school. I think that is much more likely to have a debate day at some point in the future. But Charlie Kirk, was not about debate. I know that Ezra Klein and other pundits have said, that he did discourse the right way because he used the word debate for his performances where, he as a 31-year-old man would stand up on a stage and invite, 19-year-old college students and heckle them. But I think that we can divorce the idea of debate as a form that people participate in when they're in high school and college from Charlie Kirk Day, which I think is quite inflammatory potentially.
Yeah, is that disruptive to the learning environment?
It depends on where you are, right? So Linden, for those listeners who aren't familiar with the area, is up in northern Whatcom County. It's a pretty darn conservative area, and they've had controversies before about Black Lives Matter. They had an African-American student who organized an event, and it became controversial, but the school district defended her right to organize that event, and that she was allowed to with her group to carry on with that. But it is a very conservative area, and the point I would just make about this, and also about this issue we might talk about the Kent superintendent who decided to not heed the request to lower the flag.
Right, a request from President Trump and from Governor Ferguson, and the Kent officials said, we're not going to lower the flag.
Well, here's the point I want to make about these two issues, Linden and the Kent superintendent. It's the school board. In Linden, the decision, whether you agree with it or not, was made by the elected school board. And there's a reason we have elected school boards, right? And they did put out you quoted part of it, a rationale for having Charlie Kirk Day. The Kent superintendent, I read his statement. There was no rationale in it that I could discern, no reasoning. It was just like, oh, people like the fact that I decided to not lower the flag for Kirk.
He said he made the decision grounded on our core values of equity, excellence, and community.
Oh, okay.
But he didn't say why he thinks that they don't have to obey the governor's order to lower the flag.
I mean, there's a protocol, especially with government buildings, that you lower the flag when the president or the governor asks you to. But the point I want to make is that the school board apparently was blindsided by his decision. He should have known that they were going to be blamed. They were getting the angry comments that the flag had not been lowered there, unlike apparently most other places in Kent. And so that's the distinction I want to make is he did that without consulting the elected school board. He is not elected himself. At least Linden is the elected school board, so you can see that distinction.
I just want to quickly fact check something here. There was an update because Linden, which was going to do the Charlie Kirk Day, that was a proposal, and they actually voted last night, it looks like, to table that for now and get more input from the community. There was support for, at the meeting, many people spoke up in support of the need for peaceful civic engagement, but, sort of had issues. Many people had issues with doing specifically a Charlie Kirk Day, naming it, specifically for Kirk. So they'll take it up in the future.
There you go.
Get some community input.
And
Process works.
I think holding up school boards, I don't know the composition of the Linden School Board, but I do know about the right-wing takeover of school boards across the country, and school boards as a paragon of, exactly what the community wants. I would call that into question a little bit, but more importantly, I mean, I think, to the Black Lives Matter students event, the point you made, Rob, I mean, just because an area is conservative, I grew up in a very conservative area that's not really conservative anymore, but I had dissenting points of view. I worked on the newspaper, I wrote editorials. The fact that the parents in an area are majority conservative does not mean that it won't be disruptive to, or that most students agree with that point of view. And so I go back to that as like, we're supposed to also protect the minority. And if you have an event that is celebrating Charlie Kirk, I think that students who are not represented by that point of view are going to feel pretty put out.
My point is just that the BLM student activist was definitely representing a minority point of view for that area and was supported in what she was trying to do. Now, there was also serious pushback. So she's left the area, to be clear about, after she graduated. But I think let's give them a chance to work through it. As you said, Scott, there's that new development. Meanwhile, in Kent, I think that he's decided to lower the flag a quarter of the way instead of half of the way.
Oh, is that right?
No, I'm just making
No,
that
you
up.
made that up.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, that was not a fact-intensive statement. Okay, before we take a break, because we're talking about free speech, I want to know if this is a free speech issue. Have you been, I know you have, Rob, to a Mariners game and heard the street preachers with megaphones and loudspeakers yelling that the kingdom of God is at hand? We've walked through it. The team is interested, it is exploring with the city council the idea of limiting loudspeakers there, but as the Seattle Times points out, the city law has gray areas. We have a fact-intensive person here, Attorney General. What's the law here?
The law is, sorry, I've got a little bit of a mic hookup issue here. Okay. The law is that the city can put reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on any kind of public speech. So an example of this would be they could require these preachers to stand across the street. They could require them to dial down the volume on their bullhorns. I have, as you know, I've stood next to those guys waiting to go into the park, and my Apple Watch.
You can't leave if you want. You have a ticket to the game.
And this is by the home plate entrance. And my Apple Watch will alert me that we're at dangerously high decibel levels. It also does this at concerts, by the way, but it's like over 100 decibels. I mean, these guys do not need to be standing right next to the line at painful levels of amplification. So the city could impose reasonable TPM restrictions and without preventing them from being there altogether.
Well, but a Mariners lawyer said, this again in the Seattle Times, said the preachers are dangerously loud and aggressive, and they are, quote, singling individuals out with truly hateful messages. Wow. Which would, I don't know whether that's just a rogue comment, but are you saying that the content, that I'm standing there waiting to go to the game and this guy's screaming at me that I've lived a life of sin and I'll burn in hell, which is true, but how did he know that? Are you really saying the content is is not an issue here. Could be anything.
Yes,
Because I think
that's what I'm saying. Unless he is directly verbally assaulting an individual and saying something hateful about them individually, that's a different set of facts. But again, the city could do something about this, and it sounds like the Mariners are responding to their fan base, and because we've been putting up with it for a long time.
Well, but that
and it's been getting more and more problematic.
That's what I was curious to hear more about. Is I feel like I'm kind of a nerd to it, like being around Seattle, downtown Seattle, whether it's these folks, fundamentalist Christians, or like, there was the Black Israelites were out there a lot for a while.
At the Seahawks games.
So and in college, I would walk by people with bullhorns and stuff on campus even. So it has gotten worse though at Mariners games. You think?
In my subjective impression is,
or better if you're enjoying the message.
I mean, who can hear the message? It's painful. I don't know, and it's not a very Christian message, if you ask me. As a Christian.
There you go to content again.
Yeah. But that's not the basis for controlling. The basis is the one I already mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like that is what the basis on which the city is actually looking at it. It sounds like the city attorney's office from the Seattle Times reporting is looking at tweaks to the actual noise ordinance itself, which to Scott's point, well, I mean, I do think that, probably the Seattle Times, I'm going to say that they skew maybe a little more towards Mariners fans than my readership might. I don't know. Actually, I should probably not say that on the record because I'm probably dead wrong. But I mean, just the fact that these street preachers are everywhere downtown and always have been, sort of sporadically on the corner of 3rd and Pine. The whole time I've lived here, and now it's a problem that it's at Mariners games is interesting to me. But the second thing is, if we change our noise ordinance in a way that prohibits, let's say spikes above some level of decibels, or prohibits, bringing an amplifier with you. You can use a megaphone, but not an amplifier of a certain size or whatever. That's going to affect protests.
Yeah, what I was going to say, what about a political protest?
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to. And so when and my point about the Mariners is just that when we react and when the media reacts with a barrage of stories, it becomes an issue. And when we react to, problematic behavior by changing laws that affect everybody, there can be unintended or intended consequences of that. And I think we have to be very, very careful when the current city attorney, who is, most likely not going to be city attorney next year, starts promising that this won't affect protesters and it won't affect anything other than, street preachers screaming at Mariners games. I don't believe that. And I think people should be skeptical and wary and try to go to the limited time, place, and manner restrictions that we already have the ability to do in the law without changing it.
We need to take a break. That's Mariners and the street preaching. The problem is the prayers are working for the Mariners, so there's sort of complicating everything. Anyway, let's take a short break. We'll come right back with more of Week in Review, so I would not go away if I were you.
Support for KUOW comes from Eco Design and Maintenance, family-owned and specializing in start-to-finish exterior design using materials and methods that help to reduce environmental impact. From landscapes to hardscaping, outdoor spaces designed to be functional and long-lasting. More at eco-seattle.com.
Make KUOW part of your daily routine. Wake up to the latest local, national, and international news with Morning Edition. Learn about the people and the issues shaping the Northwest during Soundside, and catch up on it all during All Things Considered. Find us at 94.9 Seattle and the KUOW app.
You are listening to Week in Review on KUOW. I'm Bill Radke. I'm with Sound Politics podcast host Scott Greenstone, PubliCola's Erica Barnett, former Attorney General and King County Councilor Rob McKenna. We're talking about what happened this week. No grocery store for you. Kroger is closing several Fred Meyer's stores across the Puget Sound region, South Tacoma, South Everett, Seattle. The company blames theft and, quote, a challenging regulatory environment. In Everett, the city council denies that theft is that big a problem, and the mayor called the Fred Meyer closure corporate neglect. Does a private supermarket chain owe it to residents to keep a store open if they think they can make more money someplace else?
I mean, I don't think corporations, inherently, it's clear, respond to the needs of residents. So, I mean, I think that ship has sailed. I think it's great to hear people, politicians in the public eye saying this is not about theft. We don't have to believe corporations. There's been many studies on this. And the reason that corporations make decisions is because of profit. I mean, yeah, they'll make more money going.
How do you know Fred Meyer is not dissuaded by people shop? We know people shoplift, and it costs companies money. How do you know that's not a factor or a significant factor?
Well, I don't know in the sense that I haven't talked to the board of Fred Meyer, but I know that historically shoplifting has always been a problem. It ebbs and flows and goes up and down, and that's what's happened in this region as well. I think that the simplest explanation, and the one that's supported by studies showing that, that companies are able to cover the cost of theft, it's called shrink. I mean, it's built into their budget. The simplest explanation is if they can make more money in a wealthier area than a poorer area, they're going to go to the wealthier area. And so I think that's why there is, a push for grocery stores run by the city, much as in New York, here in Seattle. So, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But yeah, I mean,
Scott,
I think it's corporate greed.
Okay, a mayoral candidate, Katie Wilson, is talking about public grocery stores. What does she mean?
And you're talking now about a mayoral candidate for
Seattle, not Everett, Seattle.
Which I should just say, as a general thing, a huge disclaimer: I do not cover Seattle City Hall for KUOW because my partner works for the current mayor, not Katie Wilson. But yeah, the question of grocery stores shutting down, if the corporations are neglecting, the citizenry, as people are saying, then what could the government actually do? And obviously, Zoran Mamdani, the leading contender for mayor of New York, is saying let's have government owned or potentially even operated, I think, grocery stores. Katie Wilson has, I think, here in Seattle, Katie, who's the front runner, I would say, for mayor of Seattle, or a front runner. I mean, she won the primary. She had the biggest showing in the primary earlier this year. She has kind of, it seems like, said she's open to the idea, floated a few thoughts of either potentially the government owning the land that a private grocery store would be on, if I remember correctly. So anyone can correct me if they're wrong. Or just maybe creating a grocery-focused development zone, which seems more like the Seattle process answer to what might be a shiny socialist bauble of the moment. But I think
she does identify as both a socialist and a Democrat.
That is correct, and I believe so does Zoran Mamdani. It is tempting to say like, oh, these are just the socialists. Like, it's the new shiny idea from socialism. But I do, it's clearly a problem that everyone, socialist, conservative, moderate, whatever, is noticing affecting their communities.
Well, it seems to me that there are a lot of things the city could do to attract supermarkets and grocery stores to areas where there aren't enough of them. I mean, it'd be a lot more expensive and take a lot longer to set up government-run grocery stores, and I don't know if that's been done successfully anywhere, but they could, lower permitting costs. They could, offer tax incentives. There are a lot of things that they could do to encourage stores to come back into areas that have lost their stores. And companies, yes, they're corporations are profit seekers, and if they see an opportunity because a vacuum has been created by the departure of another store, people still have to have groceries. Now, having said that, it's a very competitive marketplace for them, and we don't just depend on supermarkets anymore for groceries. I think the traditional stores account for like 40% of grocery sales now, maybe 42%, and that's because of the rise of Walmart, Costco. Amazon just announced they're going to get into grocery delivery in a big way. So, I think that these companies, I mean, yes, they are going to try to make money where they can. I agree with you, Erica. But they have been in these areas they're now leaving for a very, very long time. If it was just about seeking wealthier areas, you'd think they would have done it a long time ago. It's not because these areas are poorer than they used to be. So what they are facing is intense competition and very, very thin margins. And they're retrenching, I think, a bit. And so what the city needs to do is to figure out how to make sure these markets are served, I think, the most efficiently and the fastest way that they can. And I think that's through the kinds of incentives that I mentioned.
Well, I think food deserts are a much older phenomenon than food delivery since the pandemic, which is kind of when it spiked. Food deserts, I mean, I've lived in a number of them. I've a renter. I've moved all over Seattle. I lived in two very food poor deserts. One was served by a red apple that at 23rd and Jackson that was very, very popular in the community. Not just because it was a grocery store and there really weren't any until you got to the Safeway, a mile away, but because they had culturally relevant foods. They had a community feel. It felt like a family type of place. People would talk to you.
So why was it a food desert?
Well, I'm saying it's a food desert now.
Oh, okay.
The
Because
red apple leaf?
The red apple
Yes.
closed down,
Mm-hmm.
and it was sort of quasi-replaced by a very mediocre Amazon marketplace store, with terrible produce and generic types of foods. And so I don't think it's just about, the market changing. I think it's about corporate decisions. And, I looked at when I lived in the Rainier Valley, I lived in the Rainier Valley for many years too. And I had previously lived in Ballard. And in Ballard, there are, I want to say 7 or 8 different grocery stores within a couple blocks of each other. That's a big difference. So companies actually are going to those wealthier areas where they see an opportunity to sell higher value items. And I mean, we can see this happening. It's not just because of trends in the last few years. It's corporate decisions. And I do think doing a small pilot or experiment is not a bad idea, or at least doing the Seattle process on it.
We both grew up with base exchanges. I saw.
Yeah.
My mom would shop at when I got here. It was McCord Air Force Base.
Sandpoint. That's where
Yeah,
we went.
Sandpoint.
These are base grocery stores?
Military.
Government-owned grocery stores?
Socialist grocery stores.
Socialist
Oh my
grocery,
God.
socialist military grocery stores.
Yeah, mine was ours was the Meridian, Mississippi Navy base.
There you go.
I am curious if permitting more corner grocery stores, which has been floated as one potential answer to this problem,
Yeah.
small corner grocery stores that have largely disappeared in Seattle, or, I don't know, more funding for farmers markets to make them year round. If those are two potential answers, or expanding farmers markets right into more neighborhoods, I wonder.
I love both those ideas.
Since we just now we're talking about zoning, basically allowing corner grocery stores. I want to ask Erica Barnett why you're here. You told me you have a little time before
It's a
this.
very deep question.
It is deep. Why are any of us here?
Wow! Everybody, turn your mics off. I got 20 tight 20 on that.
There's a big vote, Erica, on Seattle's growth plan, but I guess it's an hour or two away or something. What's going on briefly? What's Seattle voting on today?
Yeah, there was actually a vote yesterday as well. There's 2 bills that implement the comprehensive plan, which is basically the overarching city plan. Every 20 years, they do a big update, and it says where can growth go, what kind of growth, in terms of housing. It also has some regulations on tree removal, and it has stuff like the corner store provisions that would actually allow corner stores in more areas of the city, basically all residential areas. And so the city council has been debating more than 100 amendments to the first part of that plan. The other thing that they're talking about in this segment of the plan is new neighborhood centers, which are nodes of density that would be allowed around major transit stops and commercial areas that already exist.
Yeah.
So that's what's on the table.
And that's kind of more of same of like what we've been doing since maybe the 90s. Is that right? The kind of locking our density into those neighborhood nodes, you called them?
These are new in that they are they're pretty low density. So, it could be as little as 3 stories that are allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And these, to be clear, the comp plan doesn't change zoning. That's like a whole other thing that's going to happen. Right. But yeah, these are tiny areas within 800 feet. So a couple blocks of these streets that are new, but they're not going to make a huge impact on density because they're going to be low density.
Okay, I want to throw out a question. This is something that one of the public commenters said. He called out the city for ruining its character.
Say no to the city overreach of our community's character that would destroy the very charm that attracted us to our respective neighborhoods.
So I've been thinking about this. I live in a single-family neighborhood. I own my property, but do I have any? I'm sure I don't have a legal, but do I have a moral? Do I have any ownership of my neighborhood? When we say that's my neighborhood, if I was drawn to my neighborhood by the way it was, does that give me moral authority or an extra voice in saying what my neighborhood will continue to be?
You asked before the show whether or not people are entitled to have their neighborhoods kept unchanged,
Right.
and my response was, no, you're not entitled. You don't have an entitlement as a property owner in the neighborhood, but you do have an interest in preserving the neighborhood's character. It's, as you said, it's not a legal interest in the sense of like a property right you can enforce, but it's one of the oldest interests around. I mean, people have been trying to, keep things the way they are in their neighborhood for a long time. In the neighborhood I live in Kirkland, our neighbor kitty corner from us has this yard sign that someone handed him that says, "Say no to 25% of Kirkland being 4 to 6 stories high." So this is, I think, a result of the state legislation.
Wow, I'd love to fact check that particular yard sign.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I haven't bothered, but the people. He's been there a long time as an older gentleman, and he's been convinced that, oh my God, we're going to have 4 to 6 story townhomes or whatever in our single family neighborhood. So he has a right to oppose that, I guess. I mean, he can speak out, and it's his interest, but it's not an entitlement. And we have this really severe problem with housing affordability and availability in Seattle, in King County, in Washington, and nationally. I was just at a national meeting, and people were talking about this a lot because it's a problem everywhere. Where can young people afford to live? It's a serious problem, because when I left the county council to go to BAG in January of 2005, there were basically no new lots in the King County permitting system for unincorporated King County. You could just see it coming. There's like, in the Bay Area, the mayors down there told me, this is probably about 5 years ago, we were at a meeting, they said we added 500,000 jobs over the last 10 years and 50,000 housing units.
Yeah.
So this is the issue of the day. I think this is the biggest economic issue that we have, because we are pricing people out, and of course it flows down to the people who can afford the least and end up homeless because their rents go up too high. I mean, and I have to give some significant credit to the city of Seattle. They've been working on this. I mean, we see more apartment buildings, but I'm not sure how many of them are affordable. But you are seeing housing going up, and they're taking the step that more cities need to take to really allow infill. And that doesn't mean that every neighborhood is destroyed by any means, but it does mean you have to allow more. What do you think? How would you call it, Eric? And where you lived,
I wouldn't describe it as infill, because I think it's
okay.
Because where I've lived, it's always been on a major, busy arterial street. Where
right,
I moved to a quieter neighborhood relatively recently, and it was weird because I'm used to hearing buses and people talking and yelling at all hours of the night. And, so I don't think, I actually would not give the city of Seattle that much credit, because the actual infill, meaning like in residential historically single family neighborhoods, is being imposed on them by the state because the city refused to do it for so long. And so now under state law, there has to be up to four units allowed for every single lot.
But when we lived in Denny Blaine, I mean, for all those years, we saw a lot of these skinny townhomes going up on lots that used to have one home on them. Isn't that a result of loosening the zoning and allowing it, or am I misreading how that happens?
I don't know, like on specific lots, but I would assume that a lot of that was already allowed. And then the city did start allowing second units, then third units in some areas. But I think the city has had to be dragged into this kicking and screaming. And Bill, to your original question, I mean, sure, property owners have a right to show up and say
obviously.
Obviously. I live in a neighborhood now that is like that is largely single family. 1 block away it's not, but I would pay higher taxes if I could have, a store, a bar, a restaurant, like other than the 2 that exist, within walking distance of where I live. And I didn't have to get on the bus or get in my car to go like see a fun, vibrant city.
Yeah, but my question is about, I live here. We have another question along these lines, and listener, we talked this week, a listener, we're not going to have time to get to this another day. But basically, to wrap a couple questions together, how much of a voice and how much extra weight do you give a constituent's opinion who they paid? That's why they came here, and they paid taxes, and they put their heart into this community, versus someone who might like to live in this neighborhood but can't or doesn't yet?
Well, I would say that your voice has always been, of course, this is going to sound trite. Sorry, Bill. Sorry, everybody. Your voice has been your vote. And for a long time, homeowners, when they were the majority in the city, they voted not just in even year elections, but in odd year elections when we elect our city council members as well, right? And the city council members are the ones making the decisions about these, rules around like how much do we allow. I'm zooming out here, but it's I'm just trying to sort of answer your question in the way that I can. They have often, kept zoning rules tight and kept most of the city blocked off from, the kind of zoning that we've been talking about, right? Corner stores and restaurants and apartment buildings especially. But I think that is changing. And what you're seeing right now is, I think, a somewhat moderate city council that was elected by folks more so who I think don't want that kind of density in their neighborhood. But this city council wants to get reelected. They know that renters are now the majority of voters in the city. And they know that they can see polls that seem to show that building more housing especially is really popular. And they want to get reelected. And I do think that's what we're seeing now. I mean, how much weight do you give somebody who shows up to a city council meeting, versus someone who isn't able to? I don't know what the question is about that, but polls and votes, those are hard numbers. Mm-hmm. And I do think we're going to see, I don't know, this comp plan is supposed to lead us through the next decade, if I'm understanding correctly. But I think you could see it opened up and changed in the future to make room for more housing.
Yeah, it's a 20-year plan, but they do amend it all the time.
20 years, sorry.
They amend them all the time. Now, this is like the big overarching thing, but I think if you see a new city council, if you see a new mayor with different priorities, you might hear them listening more to the renter advocates that show up and the people from single family areas. Because I guess my point that I was trying to make about, wanting a corner store next to me is that single family homeowners are not a monolith. And a lot of people who moved here for vibrancy, and maybe want some more of it in the neighborhoods where they live instead of, having to move to.
But they're the newcomers changing the things that the old comers came here for.
I mean, that's an interesting point. When you make a 20-year comprehensive plan, or when you make any plan for the future, and you're listening to people who have owned homes for 50 or 60 years, I think that
that's a long time.
I'm going to try not to get myself in trouble here, but I think that it is also important to listen to people who will be here in 20 years, in 40 years, and people who, are currently being priced out and are not able to come to those city council meetings because they live in Kent now, or future renters who are not going to have the opportunity to live in Seattle that I had, as someone who moved here in 2001.
Okay. I would love to debate this more because I love this question and I'm never satisfied. We'll get back at it. Speaking of people who've owned homes for 50 or 60 years, as we age, our body produces graffiti antigens that rise to fight that graffiti. And we'll discuss that when we return.
Segue. What an intro.
On Week in Review. Don't go away.
Support for KUOW comes from Third Place Books. Mona Awad discusses her new book, We Love You, Bunny, a sequel and prequel to the author's novel Bunny, Monday, September 29th at 7 p.m. Ticket information available at thirdplacebooks.com.
And from Ryan Swanson Law, hosting their annual Employment Law webinar for employers and business owners on September 24th, discussing the latest developments at the local, state, and federal level. Registration information at ryanswansonlaw.com.
Okay, back to KUOW's Week in Review. We're still on YouTube. Hello. We've got PubliCola's Erica Barnett, KUOW's Scott Greenstone, a former Attorney General of Washington State. In the upper left-hand corner, that's Rob McKenna. And as I was beginning to say, as we grow older, this is just a physical fact, the sight of balloony-shaped letters and symbols that I can't decipher causes my cells to produce antibodies to oppose the graffiti.
RFK Jr. again.
You don't like graffiti. Is that what you're saying?
Here's what I'm saying. the city of Seattle has a new anti-graffiti weapon, and it is wielding it. The city's filed civil lawsuits seeking about $40,000 in penalties and restitution from 3 allegedly prolific graffiti vandals accused of 25 violations. The city attorney says, quote, "My message is simple. If you vandalize the Emerald City, you will pay." So first of all, Scott, will this make our city signs readable and overpasses pristine?
Oh gosh! Again, my partner works for the mayor,
right.
who has made this his a big issue of his. He's talked about this since he was on city council. He's talked about it for years.
Yeah.
He does not like the graffiti.
He once told me it drives him crazy.
Is that true? Yeah, I believe
God bless him. He's older than Bill and me.
So I'm not sure. You know, I guess I have yet to develop those antigens.
I know.
It's very clear. I mean, obviously, racist graffiti really bothers me. I do get bothered by, you know, I ride the light rail. I wrote it here, but by some beautiful murals in Soto. It's one of my favorite.
They're great.
I love. It's so Seattle to take an industrial. I mean, in the good way. To take an industrial zone, paint some beautiful stuff on the walls, and then I just get to enjoy it every day. And I do get annoyed when I see a little bit of ugly red paint, especially if it's a bad tag, you know, across one of those beautiful murals. Particularly my favorite one, which is black and white, so it's very easy to see when there's like red or green on it.
Okay, welcome to Grumpy Land.
Exactly. So I could be a little grumpy, yeah. And I feel like that we should focus on that. What it seems like this is focusing on these folks, as far as I can tell from not having covered the issue but read about it, is this seems to be focused more on folks who are tagging you know, highways and highway signs. And to me, those aren't the prettiest things anyway. So I'm not sure why the focus is on that. They're also
as long as they're readable, I take it.
Sure.
As signs.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because we can rely on them to make sure they're still readable when they're done splashing paint all over them.
Well, I
they're
mean,
so conscientious.
Okay, honestly, if you go down to, I'm not trying to dox myself here, but I live by a railroad track, and I look at the graffiti on those trains, and they actually do leave the identifying information visible. I'm just telling you,
on the trains.
I see it every time I go for a run down there by the port.
Interesting.
So, you know, but I mean, you know, you can't. This is supposed to deter graffiti. You can't deter graffiti by prosecuting a few taggers and pretending that they're going to be able to pay $40,000 to the city. This is a performative electioneer waste of money. And I say that as the third oldest, second youngest person on this panel. I do not care about graffiti in the way that our civic leaders do. And I think that if it is a priority, the way to deter it is actually just to remove it quickly. If it's in a place that the city decides we really don't want this, like...
They have those graffiti teams. I've gone out with them. They have these big paint rollers and they have beige paint on it and they cover it up.
Well, I mean, a lot of times it's the business's responsibility to do that,
yes,
though.
Yes, that's right.
And, you know, if the city wants to make this a priority, don't make it the business's responsibility or give them money to allow them to do it without cutting into their bottom lines. And again, I mean, the New York subways, the reason that they're not the way that they were in the 70s anymore is because graffiti was removed quickly and people realized there was no point.
That's the key. I totally agree with you, Erica. It puzzles me why the state isn't getting in there and removing the graffiti along the freeways promptly. And what bothers me when you see a new project like we have, you know, along the east side, for example, 405, other new projects. Where 520 meets I-5, another good example. Brand new retaining walls, freshly painted. Within a few days or weeks, boom, there's a bunch of graffiti on it. And, you know, the way to deter it is to go in and cover it up rapidly. I don't understand. So, some enterprising journalists ought to be researching this. But I don't understand why the state isn't in there fixing it more quickly.
All right, as the youngest person on this panel,
go.
Why? But on a retaining wall, isn't it kind of cool to see? I mean,
listen, kid.
Like I said, I don't care about graffiti personally. Yeah, I say let it grow, but that's my personal aesthetic judgment. And the city has a right to cover up graffiti.
Yeah,
they should do it more quickly if it's actually a priority and if this isn't performative.
It's public property. I mean, imagine how you'd feel if corporations started hiring taggers to put their logos on freeway retaining walls. You might not be as sanguine about it. You know,
good point.
So you know, it's just a public property. They don't have a right to do it. And as terms of the deterrence, one thing I know from a long background in law enforcement is if you don't enforce a criminal law, it's likely you're going to have more crimes committed because the people committing them. Two things you need to know about them. One is they do often engage in kind of cost benefit calculations like, will I get caught? Will I be prosecuted? And then secondly, the thing you need to know is, and I think this is what we're seeing in this prosecution, is a surprising amount of crime of certain types is committed by a small number of people who do a lot of it. They're prolific. And so going after the most prolific wrongdoers often does have the impact of reducing the problem you're trying to address.
Even if they don't have $40,000?
Well, I mean, that's tied, I assume that's tied to the a calculated amount of damage that they've done, or the cost of repainting it. So there has to be a rationale for the amount that they're seeking, and you seek the amount that you need to seek to amount to restitution, not how much you think they can pay. That's a separate question.
Okay, all right. I will not smile unless we talk about what made us smile. We have 3 minutes left. I think we can do this. Did anything that happened this week please you locally?
Well, I went to one of my favorite places in Ballard and spent an ungodly...
And you tagged it.
Not a tagger.
Okay.
Not a tagger.
Sorry.
Not an artist. Except the art that I produce at PubliCola. And it's called Sabine in Ballard. They charge an ungodly amount, as far as I'm concerned, for their drinks, but they have a huge non-alcoholic menu. I don't drink. The person I was with doesn't drink. But even if you do drink, you want a break or something different, they have a great non-alcoholic menu, including a whole menu of non-alcoholic gin and tonics. I had a honeydew one that was delicious.
What did it run you?
I think it was $16 or $17.
God.
Yeah.
I hate hanging out with Erica. She's clearly paid for by Big Sober.
What about you? Are you now you joined the grumpy ranks, so you didn't smile at all this week, did you?
I did join the grumpy ranks because my thing that made me smile was actually something I read in a book. As I struggle to understand America, I turn to the things that I feel like I might one day understand, which is the things around me and the city around me. So I'm reading this book from 20 years ago called Seattle and the Demons of Ambition. And it quoted this old Seattle Weekly article from the 80s. So I'm going back even further. And it is always funny to know that some things in Seattle don't change. It referred to a decision being made by elected leaders through, quote, the usual Seattle process of seeking consensus through exhaustion. And I thought, wow, some things never change. I love that.
Rob?
3 sports stories. First one's a few weeks old, but when the Sounders upset Miami and the Messi team in that, I think it was a League Cup championship game, that was a total massive upset.
If you don't know what Messi team is,
Messi,
go online.
Not as in untidy, as in Messi, the great player.
Yeah.
And it happened here, and that was amazing. 2, of course, the Mariners, really exciting. And 3, the Seahawks beating Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. For all of us who are still traumatized by that Super Bowl there, it was wonderful to see the terrible towels put away.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Seattle Storm that lost by 1 and are now out of the playoffs. I'll just say I'll tell you what I did not smile about. A car, did anyone see this on Wednesday, was being chased and by the cops, and this driver, the University Bridge was open, meaning to cars it was closed. Everyone's waiting patiently for the bridge. The car just got around everybody. I saw it on the traffic cams. The bridge had not come down yet, so the car broke through a safety arm and then jumped the gap, broke the arm on the other side, abandoned the car, which was jacked up, and escaped. And they still have not found this driver. They went straight up Steve McQueen, and since I disapprove of that, it definitely did not make me smile, children. My kids are listening. That did not smile at the sight of that thing that would make us cheer if we were in a movie theater and it happened. I
worse in person.
So sad. Okay, I got to say goodbye. That's kind of sad. Can we just all join? Can you join me in saying thank you, PubliCola co-founder, publisher, and Seattle Nice co-host Erica Barnett. Thank you, Erica.
Thanks, Bill.
KUOW politics reporter co-hosts a podcast you should be listening to, Sound Politics. Scott Greenstone. Scott, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Rob McKenna has been a county council member. He's been an attorney general. He's still an attorney, but not as general as he used to be. And I love having you here. Thank you.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Bill.
you, Rob. And thank you to the whole team, Kathy Faulkner and Kevin Kniestedt and Juan Pablo Chiquiza and Hans Twite. I'm Bill Radke. See you next week.
Support for KUOW's car donation program comes from local Kia dealers, presenting the Sportage Hybrid, an SUV with an EPA